Top 10 things not to do in Australia. Everyone must see before you go. Australia is many things. It's a continent that makes up the sixth largest country in the world and his home. This was dangerous creatures on the planet. And no, I am not just talking about Australia with a little over 8.5 million people visiting each year. Tourism is a huge part of Australia's economy. That being said, there are a number of things to look out for when you are there. So let's get right into it. Number 1. Don't stray from the path with over 66 different venomous species, which is the third largest concentration in the world. By the way, it's important to know where you are at all times. This is especially true if you plan on trekking or camping in the outback with things like the common brown snake box, jellyfish, crocodiles. There is no shortage of dangerous animals here. So it's important that you stay on the path when you are exploring. And that goes for warning signs as well, because while it may seem funny to some people from different countries here, that are very real and should be taken seriously. Number 2. Don't underestimate the cost. Australia is known for having the highest living cost in the world, and travel there is no different. Of course, it's all subjective depending on where you go and where you are. Still may surprise you to hear a beer costs around $9 and a meal of mid-range restaurant costs around $40. Now, all in all, if you're really trying to save money, you can get it down to around $100 per day. And I'll just throw that number out there as an average between transportation, food, and lodging. That price can get a bit expensive, so it's important that you price out your trip according to your budget. Number 3, and this is a short one. Don't say shrimp on Barbie. This phrase was popularized by a 1980s ad with Paul Hogan, who was later in Crocodile Dundee. He was sponsored by Australian Tourism Commission to try to bring in international travelers. This is absolutely not what an Australian would say. If they would even use that phrase at all, they would say prawn, not shrimp. So don't make it any more annoying than it already is. Number 4. Drinking in Australia. I am talking about major cities, specifically Sydney, so don't quote me on the rest of the country. But in Sydney, you can't get a beer after 1:30 in the morning because they have something called a lockout law, which means no one is allowed in or out of bars past that point in time. And their last call is at 3 in the morning. And of course, don't drink and try and drive because they have one of the lowest blood alcohol content levels. Number 5. Don't estimate its size. Australia is a country with about 25 million people, and because it's a continent, it's made up of almost 7.6 million square kilometers. And despite the fact that majority of its population is clustered around the coast in urban areas, it still means that as a tourist, it's going to take a long time to get from place to place. So it's important to take a look at exactly how long it's going to take you to complete your itinerary. Number 6. Do not always tip. Oh, in some countries, tipping isn't required. In Australia, however, that's mainly because their minimum wage is the highest in the world at around $18.93 an hour. In the places like in US, waiter staff required tips to earn a living wage because the national minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. If you have great service for sure, you should tip the person. And all I'm saying is you won't be scored, like in the US. Number 7. Don't rely on public transport. Because Australia is so big and so spread out, public transport is difficult to find outside of major cities. You know, it's not like Europe. We can take the train to a small town, but overall Australia is just too big for that to be feasible. So you're better off finding another way to get around. Number 8. Don't talk about immigration. For most of the part, many Australians dislike the way that the government handles immigration, whether they are anti-immigration or whether they are disgusted by the way the government handles refugees. Of course, it's all the people in between. The bottom line is that immigration is a big deal in Australia and it's easier to avoid the topic. Number 9. Don't take anything personally. The Australians always seem to be joking around, and insults are one of the ways that they do that. But don't make the mistake of thinking they mean anything. Buy it was a funny same word, you know that it certainly doesn't like you if they don't insult you, because it means that they actually think there is something wrong with you and they hate will offend you. So take everything with a grain of salt. Number 10. Don't be afraid to say hello. Australians have a pretty well-deserved reputation for being laid back, like I was talking about before, but the kidding around. They are good at taking things in stride, which makes it easy as a tourist to make friends, and talking to people isn't difficult. Make sure you enjoy Australia. Australia is such a cool place with so many fun and interesting people, and there is so much to do there. Support? Keep in mind these are all general guidelines and tips that I found out while I was there, because I'm sure you'll have a fantastic time while you're there.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe my channel.